The First Book of Moses, Bereshayath, Chapter 1, First Creation by Elohim. In the former time periods, as a powerful sign of working, chief son and heir Elohim filled with choice things, behold, as a sign Shemayim, the place of the names, and behold, as a sign Aratz, the chief place of running. But observe how Aratz was unorganized and empty, and Sheshach rose up from the deep waters, went up to its face, but the Ruach Elohim, as a wall of protection, moved violently upon the surface of the waters. Elohim then declared, light he will exist, and light he will exist. And Elohim gazed upon that beautiful light, and Elohim made distinctive the light from the darkness. And to the light Elohim called out the name Ya'um, and to the darkness he called out the name Leah Laha. This was the close and the dawn of the first age.
The Ketub Abarayath, or the Paleo-Hebrew, is a language over 5,000 years old. It chronicles a story branching forth from ancient time. His story, Yahweh. Walk into his story. Read the Paleo-Hebrew scriptures.
Shalom, shalom. My name is Noel Joshua Hadley. Hopefully you know the address that you're at right now. The zip code. How about the crossroads? This is, of course, the Unexpected Cosmology. And I think that the title here at the Unexpected Cosmology, I like to look into the macro and the micro of the of spirituality, the kingdom of heaven within. We look at a lot of that kind of material. And I think that I'm going to be living up to the title, The Unexpected Cosmology, tonight. Be looking at iconography. Now, I'm going to do it old school. And I just released this paper earlier this week, Iconography. And I'm well pleased with it, this investigation. And I hopefully you guys are going to enjoy this too. You know, I hope I'm not going to like ruffle any feathers. That's never my intent when I come out with these things. Some people just, you know, hear something they don't like and they get frustrated. But because I am looking at every single this Millennial Kingdom investigation that I have been in now for several years, going back to 2020, I've wanted to look at every single aspect of medieval culture. The good, the bad, the ugly, the warts, the everything. And I want to leave no stone unturned. And I just don't like it when individuals go, yeah, this was the Millennial Kingdom, but I don't like all this. I'm just going to throw it all out and say somebody else added that. Like, that's not the way it's going to work. So this investigation into iconography started last year. I'll be delving into a little bit of that explanation as we get into the paper. And when I researched this is the culmination of about almost a month's worth of work writing this, researching, writing. It blessed me immensely, and I hope it does others as well. Before I do get into this, I want to take you to my store over here. And if you're ever interested in the new products that we are putting in and you don't know how to find them, because a lot of people will tell me that we have this nifty little button right here that says new, and you just click on this and oh my goodness, all these new things popped up. There's iconography right there. We are going to be, this has been requested. We're going to come out with this as a physical book too, iconography. I am having my editor work on it as we speak. So for those of you who are like, wait a second, I already bought the digital copy and now you're telling me you're editing it. Well, see, the great thing about a digital copy is that once you purchase it, you can get a new copy anytime you want, because I make changes to these papers all the time. like all the time. I'm constantly going in and adding new information. I have dozens and dozens and dozens of these, and every day I'm coming out with new stuff. So you just go in there and get a new copy. It's that simple. I wanted to show you guys how we have all these t-shirt lines. You can, oh, I got to show you guys this. I've been showing you this over the last few weeks. There's the worst cult ever. If you want a mug, t-shirts, we have t-shirt worst cult ever t-shirts and mugs. I was hoping to have this week the moon map t-shirts up in the store. They're ready to go. I just haven't put them in the store yet. So hopefully next week you'll see them. The great conversation starters when you walk into a room and it shows the moon map and an arrow pointing to "you are here." So great way to talk about the greater realm with people and how our world is showing up in the skies. So oh yeah, I was going to say one more thing too, that this is really perfect timing because, as you know, this is, well, if you're watching this live, it's a Friday night preparation day. We're going into the Sabbath, so Shabbat Shalom to everyone. If you partake on the seventh day, I'm not sure if you're a lunar Sabbath or maybe an 8th day Sabbath or whatever you are, Shabbat Shalom. But with the Torah portions, it just so happened to be coming up on the bronze serpent in the wilderness. I was like, this is a God thing. Like, this is the most incredible timing. This doesn't always happen like this. So because I was a week ahead of my Torah portions anyways, which, I think it was a divine plan there, I decided, I'm going to put it off for a week. I'm going to make it a 2-week event. Talk about iconography this week, and then we'll delve into next week. So let's just get right into it. Pausing every so many minutes for a drink of coffee. Iconography, Mysteries of the Millennial Kingdom by yours truly, Noel Joshua Hadley, published on 6/15/26 for all you numbers people out there, if you want to make something of that. Have you ever stared into a painting and felt, moved with inspiration? Be careful. The mood may prompt you to pray. Big mistake. The Protestant police will show up to call you an idolater and convert you to KJV onlyism, because when they wander that wing of the gallery, they feel nothing at all. They do it stoically in bed as well. Haven't I ever told you that visiting an art museum was a dangerous endeavor? Now you have been warned. Continuing with my Mysteries of the Millennial Kingdom investigation, I'm finally jumping into the deep end of the pool. Don't worry, I have a swimming partner. It's called a hypothesis. I have repeatedly stated that the Middle Ages was the physical embodiment of Yahshua Messiah's millennial kingdom. I'll be saying Jesus Christos through most of this. And as part of the scientific process, I have put medieval religiosity to the burner. So these are just some links if you're following along you want to grab a copy, and this will lead you to some of the other investigations I've looked at. I've looked at dozens more, but this is some of them. Labyrinths, the Pilgrim's Path, and showing how all of the Middle Ages was one big pilgrimage, one big Sukkot event. The Nazarene, War of the Sons of Light against the Sons of Darkness. That's looking at the Dead Sea Scrolls and showing how they came to fulfillment. The Green Man, Gargoyles and Grotesques, the Maypole Mysteries, Camelot, the Black Plague, Friday the 13th, King Henry VIII, Prester John, 500 Years of the Phoenix, and Vesica Piscis, just, of course, to name a few. That consists of just some of my doggy paddling through the shallow end of the pool. So far, I have managed without a leg cramp, but you never really know with these things. We should prepare for every possibility. Admit it, up to this point, many of us have only been getting our toes wet, because what I'm about to tackle will test your theological limits, particularly if you have been given a Protestant upbringing. And why do I keep using a pool analogy? Probably because it's the heat of summer and one can dream. Let me tell you, it gets really hot in this room, particularly around noon onwards. Well, high diving into the most controversial topic of all, iconography. I actually take that back. When I finally get to the crucifix, which I'm not going to cover this week, when I finally get there, I think that will probably be the most controversial. But I never really know what the most I always imagine what the most controversial is, and it usually turns out not to be. It's usually when I'm like not thinking about it that I get blindsided. But I'm going in. Don't try to stop me. So, what is iconography? If somebody has wandered into this discussion and you don't have a clue, I'm about to explain it. And by the way, if there's any Orthodox brothers or sisters out there, and you are out of curiosity going like, "What is this guy saying about our religion?" I went into this as unbiased as is humanly possible, at least for me, though everybody has their biases. And I hope I did you guys well by trying to understand Orthodoxy the best I possibly could. So imagine the following scenario. You walk into two random cathedrals. It could be any, say, country in Europe. In the first, you observe a statue of the Virgin Mary. In the second, you recognize a flat two-dimensional image of her, the Virgin Mary, painted on wood. Both are icons. Both host candles. Devoted worshipers are bowing before her in either scenario, praying. Both are intended for the purpose of veneration. It doesn't matter whether or not she is holding baby Jesus or not. Maybe she is or maybe she isn't. Have you entered a Catholic or Orthodox church, and can you tell the difference? Assuming there are no statues present, then you have more than likely crossed the threshold of orthodoxy, as you can see on the illustration of the right over here. Carved statues are generally forbidden for liturgical use or personal devotion in that tradition. Though I may bounce back and forth between both cathedrals, Catholic and Orthodox, in the following paper, moving forward, I intend the bulk of this investigation to focus upon the later tradition, Orthodoxy, but you never really know. Now, I'm not going to be giving a whole history of the Orthodox Church, though it is fascinating that the Orthodox Church was an empire that lasted about 1,000 years, that happens to fit like a glove right in the years I'm looking at, 500 to 1500. So that's a whole nother discussion right there. Iconography was a staple of the Middle Ages, though many of us recognize the Millennial Kingdom when we see it. Noting that likelihood, I aim to give you the most scholarly answers possible rather than moving the goalie net and making icons politically correct for my Protestant friends. Therefore, the simplest and most exoteric explanation possible describes the sculpted and painted images in basilicas and cathedrals as a form of religious education, serving as the foundation for the cultural life of the individual, and in doing so, connecting locality with the universal church as a whole. Am I doing okay so far, Orthodoxy? We are often told that hardly anyone could read in the Middle Ages due to the Latin language. I find that really difficult to believe. I mean, for 1,000 years, Latin was a universal language, which in turn gave birth to the Romance languages like Spanish, Portuguese, French, Italian, Romanian, Catalan, I think you pronounce that Galician, Sardinian, Romansh, or is that Romanish? Maybe that's the first typo right there. Though it is true that Russian uses a Cyrillic script, it relied heavily upon the Greek alphabet, which the Latin also derives from. And of course, in turn, the Greek language derives from the Phoenician, which, in my humble opinion, ultimately derives from the Paleo-Hebrew. Of course, we're putting out the Paleo-Hebrew scriptures here at the Unexpected Cosmology. Check it out. And Yah purposely hid the Paleo from Israel. So the Paleo-Hebrew was also hidden during this time period, though those books are beginning to be opened again. The illiteracy rate was 90% during the Middle Ages, according to the scholars. Don't shoot the messenger, all right? I'm just quoting what they're telling me. Only the scribes and the clergy could read, apparently, which is why the uneducated needed icons at their disposal to tell them a story, while the confusing Latin was read in churches and nobody could understand what they were saying. Perhaps that is true. Perhaps it isn't. I don't know, as I wasn't there to sit through the church services. Personally, I'm tired of the propaganda and think something else was going on. My entire point being that there is rich irony at play. Today's public is literate. Are they, though? That's actually becoming less and less true by the year. And yet don't have the slightest clue what is going on with the surviving icons. Even the historians will argue that their meanings have been inversed. So who is truly illiterate in this situation? Today, we are a more illiterate people than ever. So for all that talk about out there about how, the sad people in the Middle Ages that couldn't read anything. Now, if you look here, I'm giving you 3 examples of medieval icons, each intended to convey a different narrative angle. Are these Catholic or Orthodox? I'll let you figure that out. The first example is an alabaster figure of the Virgin and Child. Admit it, you're already getting uncomfortable, aren't you? Some of you have already turned to the Christian thesaurus of insults and landed on the word pagan, haven't you? It is thought to have been made in England by an unknown artist in around 1350 through 1375. They were basically all unknown artists, by the way, at that time period. They didn't start getting noted until the Enlightenment. The artists, the craftsmanship, everything, nobody knew who built this stuff, for the most part. Artists would not, again, like I say here, artists would not begin being identified until the Renaissance, as I have shown in Michelangelo Divine. What do you make of that? The fact that it derives from England makes it all the more precious, seeing as how it miraculously survived the horrors of a man named King Henry VIII and his make-believe church that he invented. The main difference between a cross and a crucifix is that a crucifix includes the corpus of Jesus, while a cross is plain and empty. Most of you already knew that. So the second example is most definitely a crucifix right there. A crucifix from the Millennial Kingdom, that is. Both the Catholics and the Orthodox do have those. Perspiring yet? Squiggling in your chair? I'm not. Thinking about inciting another iconoclasm, or may I please continue with my talk? Like the Virgin and Child, the original church from which the crucifix comes is not known, though many think it derives from Spain, from Romanesque Spain. The third example is being shown again and is intended as a triple take. Left to right, the first is the reliquary bust of an unknown female saint, way over there on the left. Likely one of the Vestal Virgins. It is South Netherlandish, dating to 1520 through 1530. The second, which looks almost identical to the first, is accredited to Saint Balbina, a Vestal Virgin, also South Netherlandish, 1520 to 1530. But wait, stage right is the reliquary bust of Saint Ursula, yet another Vestal Virgin. It derives from Brussels this time, same dates as the others. Well, that's kind of awkward. Were these icons being turned out in a corporate factory and assigned various names to complement everyone's favorite local patron saint? We already knew the MK was uniform, but this is too much. Perhaps it is best to rip the Band-Aid right off, kill the illusion from the start, or perhaps there is something else going on and the confusion is intentional. Who knows? The purpose of this investigation, like the others, is to remove the layers of propaganda and discover the true Millennial Kingdom, if possible. Beautiful craftsmanship, no. This is the same one from different angles. Now, from looking down at it from behind and atop, the reliquary bust was intended to direct the worshiper towards a ruling saint in the heavens, as if that's not suspicious. They would also be carted out and carried in processions on their feast days. So if you ever wanted to know what Cinderella is all about, then there you go. You know, her one night at the ball with the gown, carted out. You're welcome. Balbina got all dressed up for the ball on March 31st, Ursula on October 21st. Don't be jealous like her illegitimate sisters. Was it idolatry is a question of the hour. For all I know, the reliquary bust was in actuality an MK cookie jar. But such an explanation would be too easy of an out, wouldn't it? I'm not interested in moving the goalie net. I will therefore try my best to uncover all theological angles and leave it up for you to decide. I would also be lying if I said I wasn't wrestling with the issue while writing this. Now, these here are my own personal pictures that I took. And again, guess, are these Orthodox or Catholic? I think we all know the answer. These are all Catholic. Beautiful stuff, though, no? Second intro, Paris iconography. Paris. I have observed medieval iconography in other places, but it was at the Musée de Cluny that I fell deeply in love with them. They are Catholic, obviously. Do I need to keep stating that fact? Despite their reported origins, I could stand there and stare at its various relics for hours. Crucifixes, croziers, thuribles, reliquaries, and statues, to name a few, allowing the deeper spiritual realities of each to wash over me, absorbing a higher dimension with my own. If only I wasn't on parental duty. Just leave me be, alone, for the entire weekend if necessary. Seriously, give me a couple of baguettes from the local boulangerie to snack upon, and access to the bathroom, I guess the drinking fountain as well, and then just lock the doors, making sure they don't hit your butt on the way out. I'm good to go. That's how much I could just sit there and just stare at this stuff. I mean, beautiful, beautiful relics from the past, and just filled with mystery too. What is all this stuff? What did it mean? I have been to many history museums, and it helps to know that Musée de Cluny is translated to mean National Museum of the Middle Ages. So you will not find anything there that does not correspond with the years 500 through 1500, the very centuries that I hypothesize to be the Millennial Kingdom. Compare these relics with, say, the National Museum of American History at the Smithsonian. You can't. It can't be done. There's no comparison. I mean, you go look at nostalgic relics from America. You find lunch pails with, Transformers on it, or Care Bears, or, you find Mickey Mouse. You know what I'm saying? You see stuff like that. Archie comic books. I don't know. But they're not religious like this. The modern Protestant or non-denominational evangelical can get their knickers in a twist over the theological wrongness, quote unquote wrongness, of the Middle Ages when compared with their own quote unquote enlightenment, which is kind of a laughable thought. But what they cannot do is disprove my claim that nearly every material aspect of the medievalist was focused upon the kingdom of heaven. Indeed, the Middle Ages was the most hyperactive spiritual time in his story. That everything that I've seen that has led me to that conclusion. These people were truly, like, if it was a material object, it was directing them to the kingdom within. Whether or not they were theologically correct about everything is secondary to their spirituality, so far as I'm concerned. I have stated the following on multiple occasions, and this won't be the last time that you have heard me say it. Many of the greatest in the kingdom won't necessarily have the best batting average in the theological department. Whereas those who do have great batting average may just come to find themselves the least. And that is because achievement in the kingdom is all about mastering the Beatitudes. But you can find that in the Gospel of Matthew if you're curious for chapter and verse. Links to many of my MK research papers have already been shared with you. Everything that I have come to learn about the medievalist, and I keep using that word, but you know what I mean, Millennial Kingdom, has led me to conclude that they devoted their lives to discovering the renewed Jerusalem within. I believe it was later that very evening that I began sharing these photos with my research community, Tech Discord. Please come and join if you haven't already. And some of the pictures that I've just shown you in the museum, which a bored woman with enough children to fill an Amish household and way too much time on her hands, began frantically writing as I'm like posting this in real time, all like, caps and everything. Idolatry. This is idolatry, I tell you. We're talking lots of caps and a lot of exclamation points for the added effect. Wait, how did that go again? You can see it written right there. Idolatry. Look, I am completely okay with her convictions, okay? Seriously. Like, same with yours out there. Anyone listening, I'm fine with yours as well. Everybody poops, and she is free to do the same. I poop as well. We all pull up our pants the same way. Just not all over my conversation, okay? Ashley, yes, we'll call her Ashley for reference purposes. She could have any name, but that's just what we're going to call her for this conversation. She couldn't even let me post a picture and get a sentence out as commentary before scribbling another rant. She could have saved herself the time and gotten back to her children by dropping a poop emoji or something like that. Why the need to shut the conversation down? What was she afraid of? People learning about medieval worship habits? FYI, this Ashley girl claimed to believe the Millennial Kingdom happened. Okay, just for reference purposes. So if I'm correctly understanding her argument, the inconvenient part of the Middle Ages, especially the theological aspects which she does not ascribe to, was invented for the specific purpose of making the MK look bad centuries later when people finally started discovering it for themselves. Yeah, well, I don't play that game. I was there at Musée de Cluny, and shortly afterwards, when dealing with you-know-who, that my hunger for iconography was realized. I wanted to shed the pounds of prior programming and understand icons as the medievalists did. Just short of time traveling to be there. I want to understand the best I could. So this investigative paper is therefore not devoted to the Ashleys of the world, but to the seekers of the mysteries of heaven. The Millennial Kingdom invites us in. To this very day, you can live it out. So iconography versus idolatry, the golden calf. Like you, I grew up Protestant, which means I was raised to think like a Protestant. Unless you were raised Catholic, Orthodox, Armenian, Coptic, or Syriac, that is, in which case we did not think alike. Maybe we do more now than ever. As a former Baptist, church walls were as plain and simple and colorless as a preacher's shirt, and unkempt as his waistline. I can also tell you that all icons were idols. The RCC was Babylon, the Madonna its whore, and the Pope was its Antichrist. Protestant propaganda against its competition. And of course, depending upon your denomination, Satan slapped genitals on men, baby feeders on women, and sex was icky and gross. They keep to the shadows, but believe me, but they do exist. Though I am no longer Protestant, many of its beliefs still linger, emerging from my subconscious on occasion. Shedding those pounds have not been easy, but investigations such as these are helping me get there. So what is idolatry, and are icons a subdivision of it? If it is possible to answer that question, then we will require the same passage that every other theologian and church father has turned to since icons were first introduced, the Ten Commandments. So reading from the Paleo, this is what it says in Exodus chapter, or Shama'uth chapter 20. And Allahayam set words in order, arranging all these ha-dabarayam to say, all these words to say. I am Yahweh, your Allahaya, which caused you to go forth from Aratz Mitzrayim, that would be Egypt, from the house of slavery. There shall not exist to you Allahayam, Akarayam, or secondary gods, secondary Allahayam, to my face. You shall not fashion, working by labor, to yourself a graven image or semblance of that which is in Shamayam above, that would be heaven above, treacherously, or that which is in Aratz, that's the earth, from beneath, or that which is in water from the lower parts of Aratz. Do not bow yourself down to them and do not serve them. For I, Anukaya, Yahweh, your Allahaya, am a jealous all, striking against the depravity, crime, or guilt of the fathers upon the offspring unto the third and fourth generation of my haters, and working hesed, zeal and kindness, desire and pity, unto thousands of them that love me and guard my commands. So that's Exodus 21 through 5. There it is. I have just listed off for you the first two commandments in which worshiping other gods and fashioning them, or even fashioning Yahweh for that matter, is a graven image and strictly forbidden. It couldn't be any clearer. No need for further discussion. Case closed. Thanks for stopping by. Good night. Some of you are nodding with approval, though I'd rather hear from all sides. So we'll get there. The context, as you know, is that Moses is receiving the commandments on Sinai, and that it is being written by the finger of Yahweh on stone. What follows down below under the shadow of the mountain is one of the most perplexing incidents in his story. So here we are reading again from the Paleo-Hebrew Scriptures, Exodus chapter 32 this time. And the people, confounded, observed that Mashah, that would be Moses, had failed their hope and expectation by not descending from out of the mountain. And the people together called out unto Aaron and said to him, Arise, fashion to us Allahayam, and he will walk to our faces. For this man, Mashah, which brought us up out of Ratz Mitzrayim, we have no knowledge as to what exists to him. And Aaron declared unto them, Break off golden rings which are on your ears of your women, or on the ears of your women, on your sons and on your daughters, and bring them to me. And the people broke off all the golden rings which were on their ears and brought them unto Aaron. And he took from their hand and formed him with an engraving tool, after he had fashioned him as a revolving bullock cast from metal. And he declared unto them, This is your Allahaya, O Yasharel, which has brought you up from Aratz Mitzrayim. And Aaron observed, and he built an altar to his face, and he called out, A feast unto Yahweh tomorrow. I want to write a whole paper just on that line right there. A feast unto Yahweh tomorrow. But another time. And they rose early on the morrow and offered ascending offerings and approached with thanksgiving. And the people settled down to eat and to drink and rose up to laugh, to mock, and to make sport. Exodus 32, 1 through 6. The context has Yahweh coming down from heaven and settling upon the mountaintop. This after the plagues of Egypt and the Red Sea incident. There is fire and smoke and deafening blasts of a trumpet. Moses may have been gone for longer than anyone expected, but everyone within the camp of Israel can see and hear and feel God's presence. Clearly, he is in the pillar of cloud by day and fire by night. If God wanted to appear to them as a fish or a bull or even a man, then he would have done so, and he didn't. Therefore, Israel's decision to engrave him into the image of a bull lands as a definite contender for their most morally depraved moment in the Bible. Though, believe me, there are plenty of other morally depraved moments. Now, I happen to like Jonathan Targum's account, whether or not it gives further insight into the present conversation. And surprisingly, it does. The Aramaic Targum is a rabbinical book. The Jews had good reason to declare every icon in orthodoxy an idol, but they didn't. When describing the golden calf, they actually managed to agree with orthodoxy. But then it has just occurred to me that I haven't even shared the passage yet. So give it a read and then let's discuss this. So reading once again from Exodus 32. I don't know if I want to read the whole thing. I think I'm just going to, well, let's see what I'll read here. But the people saw that Moshe delayed to come down from the mountain. The people gathered together to Aaron when they saw that the time had appointed to them had passed. And Satan had come and caused them to err and perverted their hearts with pride. And they said to him, Arise, make us Elohim that shall go before us. For as for this Moshe, the man who brought us up from the land of Mitzrayim, he may have been consumed in the mountain by the fire, which flames from before Yahweh. And we know not what hath befallen him in his end. All right, let me just read the last paragraph here. For Aaron had seen his slain before him and was afraid, and he built an altar before him. And Aaron cried with doleful voice and said, Let there be a feast before Yahweh tomorrow of the sacrifice of the slain of these adversaries who have denied their Adonai and have changed the glory of the Shekinah of Yahweh for this calf. So in this version, I mean, people are like getting slain in front of Aaron, and he's like getting concerned for his own life here. And on the day following, they arose and sacrificed burnt offerings, and the people sat around to eat and to drink and rose up to disport themselves with strange service. Various detail differences are to be expected of the Targum. We have those. For example, the golden calf was only made possible because of Satan. But there's still more to show you. So I guess I am not quite ready to discuss everything that is going on quite yet. Jumping ahead, and this is what we see. And it was when Moshe came near the camp and saw the calf and the instruments of music in the hands of the wicked who were dancing and bowing before it, and Satan among them, dancing and leaping before the people. Jumping down here to the last paragraph, Aaron is explaining himself. And Aaron said, and I said to them, whoever hath gold, let him deliver and give it to me. And I cast it into the fire, and Satan entered into it, the fire, and there came out of it the similitude of this calf. So according to the Aramaic Targum, they're saying that like Aaron didn't even craft the calf, the ox. It just came out looking like that. So as I was saying, the talent responsible for the Jonathan Targum were Jews, and they could have left the graven image alone. But no, in this account, the calf became a literal god inhabited by Satan rather than simply a depiction of one. According to Aaron, all he did was melt the gold. The idol rose from the fire as an actual calf by the power of Satan. We arguably have before us the true historical and theological understanding of an idol. Now, some of you may disagree with this, but this has been the push for understanding of idols for a very long time. Idols were generally created with the intention of not only representing a god, but embodying or even accessing the power of the said god or spiritual being. This is certainly one of the points that the Orthodox bring up. Worshippers generally do not believe the statue itself is the ultimate god, though they may at times. The idol is intended to be a physical conduit or earthly body that draws the God's divine presence into space and time. Is that what the Orthodox and Catholics are doing? I'm on to you guys. It is certainly what Satan was doing. He filled their heart with pride before leading them in the procession. More on the pride element in a moment. So Exodus 32:25 from the KJV. For all you KJV only people out there, I'm looking out for you too. And when Moses saw that the people were naked, it famously says this in the KJV, but not other translations. But I like this version. I like this. This is good. So they were naked, for Aaron had made them naked unto their shame among their enemies. The King Jimmy version claims the worshippers were naked. It is no coincidence that wild, erotic dancing and revelry was common in ancient pagan fertility rituals, such as the worship of the Egyptian cow goddess Hathor. So naked is really just a nice way of describing an orgy. In all possible versions, those who worship the golden calf were not doing so with reverence, but in a laughing, mocking, and sporting manner. They were standing before the judge, Yahweh, in his very presence, in contempt of court, which makes their moral depravity even worse. Hildegard of Bingen was a Catholic with commentary to offer, and I think we should listen to her. I won't claim to speak for everyone, and she certainly doesn't speak for orthodoxy or vice versa, but I imagine that many who reject icons on the basis of idolatry will not think the same way about images on a page, which she has those. Hildegard's illuminations were used as visual exegesis and didactic tools for those who were fortunate enough to crack open the right book and encounter them. See, so even her beautiful illuminations were used for spiritual enlightenment, to really focus on them and to delve deeper into the mandala that she loved mandalas. You see one right there. Well, here's how she relates the golden calf episode. The evil deceiver who wrongly usurps the chair of the episcopal office without being elected or properly anointed, and the wicked robber who expels his pastor by the whispers of his henchmen and violently invades the throne will either undergo grave expiation by their own will or incur serious condemnation by my wrath. This is, of course, God speaking here. For they are in the worst possible state of bitterness, imitating the one who wanted the highest honor for himself and was cast out of glorious happiness into death, and following Baal, who so deluded himself that he wrongly named himself a god and was given over to destruction. So that comes from Hildegard of Bingen in her book Scivias, which is a great read if you've never read that book. We have already witnessed the evil deceiver's part in the Golden Calf episode via Satan. How Hildegard perceives the situation is therefore nothing short of fascinating. They were usurping Moses and wanting the throne for themselves. They wanted God, but in a depraved character of their making. Sexual deviancy. Don't make me turn this into an encyclopedia-sized Bible study, all right? Israel was intended to be a kingdom priest in Exodus 19:6, but they rejected the offer, sending Moses in their place. Of course, just last week in our Torah portions, we went through Korah's rebellion. Hildegard's understanding of Baal is next level. She claims he was a real person who followed in Satan's footsteps and made himself a god. She's likely referring to Baal Hammon, king of Libya, who transformed himself into a weather god. And I covered Baal Hammon in brief in Ham's Mystery Children, an investigative paper which follows the serpent seed saga post Noah's flood. So you could say Israel did not want to follow Moses' path for an inexplainable reason. They preferred becoming their own god. And of course, the golden calf was paving the way. Moral depravity indeed. We should be jotting this down in our notebooks before hearing the Orthodox followers give their defense of icons. So let's get into iconography versus the iconoclasm. Widespread use of iconography only began after Roman Emperor Constantine legalized Christianity in the whereabouts of 312. It is well documented that Christian groups began destroying polytheistic idols and other depictions in pagan temples, and also quite separately that they began including their own. Perhaps the swap wasn't a coincidence at all. I believe it was while discussing the curious life of Hypatia and her potential doppelganger Catherine in Hypatia versus Saint Catherine, I should say, in Hypatia versus the Millennial Kingdom, that I observed, quote, priests simply swapped out one cloth for another, unquote. In many ways, that research paper and this one are conjoined, and Constantine versus the Millennial Kingdom, if you remember that one, will probably do some good as well. I need to do a lot of updates to that. My opinion has wavered back and forth on the man, Constantine. If my present opinion of Constantine matters to you, I see him as more of a politician than a religious leader, where in the past I criticized his religiosity. And there's a difference. When we cut away the lens of his religio-political biographers and propagandists, that is essentially what he was, a politician. Take that for what it's worth. Under Constantine's administration, the winds had changed. He saw the writing on the wall, quite literally, more like in the sky, and he made changes accordingly, aligning himself with the denominations who he might benefit best from while canceling out some of the others. So some Christian denominations lost in the equation. We are told that Edict of Milan granted full religious freedom to all faiths, but I'm not so convinced that was the case. Who lost in the paradigm shift? Well, no contest. The Nazarene suddenly found themselves without a state-sponsored religion, which, when it had been so bad, had the government not opposed them. I've already dropped you links to my Nazarene investigation, so you can check that out. And its follow-up, War of the Sons of Light Against the Sons of Darkness, that all ties in the Millennial Kingdom. There's a lot going on there, and I don't care to repeat all that information again. I'm bringing it up now just so anyone in the comment section, they're like, well, I'm Nazarene. Okay, well, great. I've covered the Nazarene too. So I want to look at all different angles here. To further complicate the situation, we are offered a star-studded lineup of theologians who held iconoclastic tendencies, supposedly, before Constantine's arrival. Now, just to be fair, I did not I'm sourcing these individuals, I did not take the time to look up every quote. All right. So feel free to fact check me on this. But Justin Martyr, Clements of Alexandria, Tertullian, Origen, Lactantius, Eusebius, and we actually talked about Eusebius with he was with the Council of Nicaea. He was finally brought back in, but he was tossed out because he was I think an anti-Trinitarian. He finally adapted to it. And he was brought back into the church. And Epiphanius, they all appear in some degree to be seated in imageless hall. So they were against icons. So they wanted the white walls, apparently. I don't know. I wasn't there. And after Constantine, there was iconography. So before Constantine, iconoclasm. After Constantine, iconography. And lest we forget, before Constantine, iconoclasm, winds of change indeed. This comes from the Synod of Elvira, or Canon 36. And it says, there's two translations here. I'll read both of them. It says, pictures are not to be placed in churches so that they do not become objects of worship and adoration. Or another version says, there shall be no pictures in the church, lest what is worshipped and adored should be depicted on the walls. So the Synod of Elvira was an ecclesiastical council held in the Roman province of Hispania, with, I guess you say, Baetica, now Granada in southern Spain. It was attended by 19 bishops and 26 presbyters, mostly locals, paving way for broader ecumenical councils like Nicaea to follow. Its exact date is argued, but 305 to 306 seems like a safe bet amongst most historians. And Constantine's Edict of Milan would be issued nearly a decade later in 313, if I didn't mention that already. So it is clear in the very least that early 4th century Spaniards did not approve of icons in their churches. Finally, something that the King Jemmy crowd can agree upon. Can't say I don't throw you guys a bone now and then. Further invoking my curiosity is the fact that this investigation falls under the umbrella of the Millennial Kingdom, a personal hypothesis which saw its beginning in the 6th century, around 536, 541 maybe. If you're wondering why that is, then the 7,000-year timeline deception is a must-read. I give all my reasons. Actually, I have a lot more now than I put in there. I need to update that. Jump 2 centuries ahead, and now we come upon the Byzantine iconoclasm of 726 through 787, a major religious and political conflict within the Byzantine Empire that centered upon the prohibition and destruction of all icons. Exodus 24, which we read, there's a reason I read that for you, became their banner. So as you can probably imagine, very few icons survived. Well, they got to work making icons again after the 787 Council of Nicaea, and Empress Irene, a woman, if you couldn't tell, briefly restored them. Only briefly, because they would butt heads with a far inferior and suckier sequel, which hardly anyone cares to talk about, the second iconoclasm, lasting between 814 and 842. And it has just occurred to me, iconoclasm hasn't been defined, has it? Well, the wait is over. First and foremost, iconoclasm is the deliberate destruction of religious icons, monuments, or sacred images, often driven by religious or political motives. Far more broadly, there is a figurative application as well. Anyone who has ever attacked or challenged cherished beliefs, established traditions, and venerated institutions can label himself an iconoclast. I'm looking at you, Protestants, though I suppose you could say there is a little iconoclasm in most, if not all of us. I mean, even there's an iconoclast in me. It all began with Emperor Leo III when he ordered the removal of an image of Christ, which had been placed over the, I guess you pronounce that, the Chaque Gate, which was the ceremonial entrance to the great palace of Constantinople, replacing it with a Christless cross. So he wasn't big on the crucifix. Leo is said to have described image veneration as a craft of idolatry. We are then told that a mob of icon icono iconal duels murdered the man, basically those who used icons. They murdered the man tasked with replacing it, claiming that they were committing sacrilege. So now there's blood on the doorstep. So this is not good. And this started a big mob, big outbreak in the kingdom. It just grew from there. So here's a quote. He saw no need to consult the church, and he appears to have been surprised by the depth of the popular opposition he encountered. This is Warren Treadgold, A History of the Byzantine State and Society. So here we have another clear case of a politician getting in the way of the theologians. Leo III did not form a ecumenical council and was surprised when public opinion did not sway in his favor. What a shocker. You see that where Constantine was very smart. I mean, he really did go with the popular kind of Christian council. You know, some people lost out, but he was going with he wanted the favor in his corner. This emperor was surprised to see that the public did not side with him. There have been various theories as to what was going on. Seeing as how iconoclasm was concentrated in Asia Minor, some have suggested the rise of Islam, the Mohammedans, influenced his decision. Though the theory no longer holds sway over the scholars, as there is apparently no written evidence to justify the claim, I find it fascinating all the same, given my Muhammad versus the Millennial Kingdom paper. Something was certainly going on, and perhaps one day we will crack the case together. At the end of the day, all iconoclasts will agree that the move was driven by religious conviction and the call to purity. I think it is safe to say that Leo III desired to curb the power of the clergy as well, given that he did not consult with them. And this was really important since the Byzantine Empire, for the most part, they kept to the separation of government, state, and religion really well. And the idea is that the king was the emperor was separate from the priest, but he was to bow down to the priests themselves. The priests were setting the religious standard. Government kept out of it, though it was not intended for the government to be separate from the religion. You see, it was always to be orthodox. Leo III didn't keep to that principle very well. Germanos I, the iconophile patriarch of Constantinople. So if you're an iconophile, you are pro-icons. He either resigned or was deposed following Leo's ban. He can be seen in the fresco above praying to Theotokos through an icon. So look at this very carefully. There's actually two icons here. And this is actually a brilliant way to show how Orthodoxy views the icon. On one hand, down it's an above and below. So even though there's these two people holding up this icon, there's two angels up in heaven holding up the exact same icon. This has been a teaching lesson, albeit a brief one, in the theology of Orthodox iconography. Leo III didn't simply want icons of Jesus on the cross or the Madonna and Child removed. He didn't simply have it out for images of the apostles either. No, he wanted all saintly images removed, all of them. That includes artwork. Yet he had no problem minting his image on gold and copper coins. His son, Constantine V, did as well, and the persecution was far more extreme under his son. To borrow a 90s quote from Alanis Morissette, isn't it ironic, don't you think? So no icons or religious people then, just depictions of your friendly neighborhood world ruler on mana, dinero, money. We know where their heads are in this game, I guess. Not exactly the best PR look for an iconoclast. I'm detecting a little jealousy on the side. He probably ordered narcissism as the main dish, and if I may, a helping of projection for an appetizer, a mirror for dessert. Leo's hypocrisy didn't come without criticism either. Coming to the defense of smash icons in the garbage heap were the iconophiles. or as I mentioned earlier too, I guess you pronounce that duals if you prefer, but I'll be using iconophiles going forward. Among them was Orthodoxy's prize fighter, John of Damascus. Born in 675 or 676, John journeyed through to the other side of the icon in 749. So this guy was in the thick of it for a time. And here's what he writes. The emperor's face is stamped on the coins of the empire. Did anyone think that Leo himself was on the coin? Did anyone have trouble telling the difference between the emperor and a coin? And if not, why stir up all this confusion about images in the case of Christ and the saints? Pointing out the obvious, Leo III didn't want anybody's face being seen in all of the kingdom and all of Christendom except for his own, which was stamped on the coins of the empire for their convenience. Working off Leo's inductive reasoning, John's reed pen is dripping with sarcasm when prodding his critics on parchment. Did anyone think that Leo himself was on the coin? LOL. Did anyone have trouble telling the difference between the emperor and a coin? LOL again. Apparently, if John of Damascus is being intellectually honest, then Leo's understanding of an icon is rather base. Icons really did have him believing that they were intended to be the god. And remember now, this is one of the reasons I took you to the Aramaic Targum earlier in the Exodus account. To be fair, citizens of Greater Byzantium may indeed have mistaken the icon for the god, worshiping them as such. Some of them anyways. We all struggle with idolatrous tendencies anyhow. So I certainly wouldn't put it past some to worship the icon itself. Just like that being said, the irony is only emboldened by the fact that people worship money. Do they not? Because it offers them the illusion of control, just like a quote-unquote god. It doesn't take a leap of logic to conclude that Leo wanted to be the icon whom they put their hope of tangible security or material gain in. The school of Carl Jung might have done him some good. What I'm about to say was covered thoroughly in my Greece and Esoteric Analysis paper. He might have realized that the antagonist of the story, icons, were really just the shadows of his own subconscious. He needed a villain to destroy so that he didn't have to work on the idol within himself, namely his ego. So Colossians 1:15 says this, "It is through his Son that we have redemption. That is, our sins have been forgiven. He is the visible image of the invisible God. He is supreme over all creation because in connection with him were created all things, in heaven and on earth, visible and invisible, whether thrones, lordships, rulers, or authorities. They have all been created through him and for him. He existed before all things, and he holds everything together." Colossians 1:15. The iconoclast core argument relies upon Exodus 24, whereas the iconophile carries Colossians 1:15 in his pocket. In Greek, the Apostle Paul chose icon to describe Christ. You can see the Greek word right there, which just so happens to be the actual Orthodox word carried over in English for icon. So read that again. Christ is the visible icon of the once invisible God. He is supreme over all creation because in connection with him, all things in heaven and on earth were created, both visible and invisible, and he chose to become an icon. So reading from Exodus 33:20, "And he said, you are not able to prevail to observe my face, for no Adam or Adam may see me and exist." That comes from the Paleo-Hebrew Scriptures. The Na'ah people in this situation, namely the iconoclasts, really like to play hardball. They will point out Exodus 33:20, which I just read from, in which it is declared that no man may see the face of God and still live. I prefer calling the God of Israel by his given name, Yahweh, but you know how it is. God is spirit. He led Israel in the wilderness for 40 years by way of fire and cloud without materializing a body. Moses and Israel could not paint him because there was nothing to paint. Had they so much as attempted to make an image of their God, of their Allahayam, they would be designing a false representation of who Yahuwah truly was. Meanwhile, the typical iconophile, John of Damascus included, will be hung up on the marvelous mystery of Colossians 1:15 and likely has more to say by way of implication. But now that the iconoclast has boxed him back into the OT and think he has won the debate, I imagine the iconophile will direct his attention to the following passage from John 1:14, which says, "The Word became a human being and lived with us, and we saw his Shekinah, the Shekinah of the Father's only Son, full of grace and truth." The writer of John begins his book with the most insane announcement ever. The invisible God of Israel took on flesh. He became human. The very word who spoke the world into existence. Through Yahuwah, I'm sorry, I think I need another drink of coffee. Power boost. All right. Though Yahuwah had earlier told Moses that no one could see him and live, the writer testifies that he and others had seen his what? His Shekinah. As John's gospel progresses, the reader will come to learn that the people interacted with him. They ate with him. They touched him. Yahshua Messiah had hands and feet and a face to go with it. So this is what John of Damascus says. If we have understood that the one who is without a body has become man for us, then it is clear that we can represent his image, because the invisible one has become visible when he took on flesh. We can create the image of what has been seen. So it turns out that John of Damascus and I agree on the issue. I wasn't completely sure until that quote came along. Well, Jesus Christos became an image of the invisible Theos, but far more importantly, he resurrected from the dead. I'm not sure if that's where John of Damascus was heading, but it needs to be stated anyways. The very Son of God who created Adam, and of course all the medievalists believe this, that the God of the Old Testament created Adam, chose to become his creation, and not for a limited time within the confines of the material world. The image of the invisible God ascended to heaven for all eternity. So there's that. That's incredible to think about. And here's what John of Damascus says again. I do not worship matter, but I worship the creator of matter, who for my sake became matter and accepted to dwell in matter, and through matter work my salvation. That's profound. For John of Damascus and his ilk, praying or worshiping before an icon was their way of processing the reality and, in fact, the broader theological implications regarding the Logos. In turn, iconoclasts were ultimately accused of denying the incarnation. Remember, the iconoclasts are the ones trying to get rid of all the images. So they're being accused now of denying the incarnation. To say that Christ cannot be depicted is to imply that his humanity doesn't matter. For the iconophile, both natures were equally important and symbiotic to the other. Christ became creation in order to steer humanity towards the true and deeper meaning of his spiritual law beyond creation, which had been completely missed by the letter of the law crowd. Even language itself is a creation and a type of icon intended to reveal the greater spiritual reality beyond. Now, I don't really cover this a lot in this paper. It needs to be his own. The idea that for everyone who is against icons and images, guys, words are icons and images. You can't escape it. And the whole purpose of words and sentences is to get beyond that to the actual word itself, or himself. So words on the page are not to be worshipped, though often they are. Ironically, by the iconoclasts, the chapter and verse crowd, they worship the word, the canon, the 66. They worship it. And then think about even like in the Freemasons, right, where it becomes a furniture piece. When properly administered, Scripture should direct us beyond the lettering to the Logos, who is far greater than what any jot or tittle can hope to offer. So you guys see that there, that the letter of the law crowd became lost in the words themselves. Does that make sense? But Christ, as the word, the logos, came to show us the spiritual law beyond the words. He was trying to take us to the other side, to a deeper meaning, to ascend to heaven in that way. So iconophiles at the Second Council of Nicaea. To tell you the truth, I couldn't... hold on a second. To tell you the truth, I couldn't tell you at the moment if the iconoclasts were even invited. Hardly anyone invites me to a party anymore as well. So I know the feeling of rejection. And seriously, I mean, just going a little off script here. One of my friends, Polly, I hear he's being invited to a pajama party this weekend. I'm like, what? Why does no one invite me to a pajama party? Seriously. People just wait for me to invite them to my parties. But, like, it'd be nice to be invited to other councils once in a while. In 787, Empress Irene hosted one such party. 350 bishops gathered for the 7th Ecumenical Council, and in the same city where Constantine held the other one, Nicaea, the much more popular Council of Nicaea. This time around, a woman let men decide. Shocking development, I know. It was a near unanimous vote. The veneration of religious icons were restored. All those who opposed were deemed heretics, which is only a little awkward for the few who voted nay instead of yea. The takeaway here is that it is foolish to deny to Jesus Christos and his mom the same honor that was freely given to the human emperor. Human is the key phrase here. Are you human? Do you have images of yourself lying around in your wallet, perhaps? How about on your wall? How about in your computer screen, for those of you even watching me right now on YouTube or on Facebook or wherever? On top of that, was the Second Council of Nicaea what the Second Council of Nicaea managed to do is tackle the issue regarding the proper relationship between church and state, which, as I mentioned earlier, is something that the Byzantine Empire did pretty well for the most part. But wait, in Exodus 24, Israel is instructed not to make images. They are told not to bow down to them or serve them. But from 787 onward, and in fact, the whole of the Middle Ages, setting aside a notable hiccup, Orthodox Christians make images of Jesus Christos and the saints. They bow down to them, venerate them, they kiss them, and they pray. So what gives? 350 bishops. How could they go against Yahuwah's clear instruction in righteous living? All we can hope for is to get into their heads, which I will attempt to do. And then afterwards, you can make up your own mind on the matter. I'm not here to convince anybody. Really, I'm just here to try to give you the facts the best that I can uncover them, and let you guys decide. Iconoclast versus the Ark of the Covenant. If the second commandment in Exodus 24 is intended to mean that we never make any religious images ever, then Yahuwah is contradicting himself, and that's not good. Because look at what he says just 3 chapters later. This comes from Exodus 25, of course, reading from the Paleo-Hebrew Scriptures. And you shall fashion 2 cherubim, that would be cherubim, of gold, hammer work, you shall fashion them. Now, just for time purposes, I'm going to skip over this. You could see that right there, take a screenshot, or just read from the actual book. There's a saying that is popular among the chapter and verse crowd, and that is to not add or take anything away from Scripture. Iconoclasts often make statements such as that, and look what they are already doing. They are taking away from Scripture. Yahuwah is giving Moses instructions for the Ark of the Covenant. It is the very seat where Yahuwah dwells, thereby designating it the holiest object in Israel. And yet, for whatever reason, Yahuwah wants a daily reminder that images have been fashioned on either side of him. He has just stated that images of anything in heaven are not to be fashioned, did he not? And of course, cherubim is the Paleo word for cherubim. Cherubim are angels. Correct me if I'm wrong, but they reside in heaven. Perhaps they visit the earth from time to time, but the principle is the same. The contradictions continue in the following chapter, in which we see, you shall fashion a cherubim or a cherubim with devised artistic work. Exodus 25, 18 through 20. This is talking about the tabernacle, the mashkan dwelling place, the curtains that they're twisted into. The curtains of the tabernacle were embroidered with cherubim. What is going on? Contradictions, so many contradictions. And here is another one. This comes from 1 Kings chapter 6. I'll just read over the commentary on this. You can read 1 Kings 6 for yourself, 23 through 35 for the chapter. Actually, it should be verse 36. Verse 23 through 36 for the chapter and verse crowd. There's lots of different spellings going on depending upon the translation, and I happen to like it that way. So kruvim in this version is just the modern Hebrew word of writing cherubim according to the CJB translation. Well, Solomon went a little overboard, don't you think? All those cherubim sitting around, inciting idolaters to sin. You could just see here, I just put just cherubim everywhere in his temple, everywhere. I know he gave himself over to idolatry, but this is kind of early in the game. They're huge too. How huge? Well, we're talking Trump size cherubim. There's never been cherubim this huge in the history of the world. Don't even make me take out the measuring tape. They're massive, okay? In the Holy of Holies alone, cherubim statues are recorded as being 15 feet tall. So he carved huge Trump-sized golden cherubim in there. All right, so keeping all that in mind, let's revisit Exodus 20, the Ten Commandments. Confused yet? Don't be. That's why the Orthodox are here to help. It took me a very long time to observe what I'm about to show you with my own eyes. Now, something I didn't write in here, I'm going to give you a quick commentary on the side. Writer's commentary. Back in the 90s, my parents, they were gifted. Now, I grew up in the ministry, parsonage. So my parents, they were gifted things, used furniture and stuff. They didn't go out. They didn't have the money to go and buy stuff. And back in the 90s, it was really popular, those 3D prints. They were like staticky, wavy lines, and they looked nonsensical, like almost like pixelated. They were called like magic prints or something like that. I don't remember what they were called, but you were you looked at these, and you were supposed to see an image pop out. I looked at that thing for weeks and weeks and weeks and months. My parents couldn't see it either, but they were so proud of it. They put it up, like as soon as you walk in the house, you see it, because they wanted everyone to see their neat new 3D print. It was framed and everything. And one day I stood there, and I couldn't believe it. I saw a space shuttle. I think it was like the rings of Saturn, just popped out, 3D image. I couldn't believe it. It was there all along. And it got to the point where you had to look at it. You had to unlearn how you were looking at it. You had to look at it in a unique way. And it got to the point where I could just walk down the hallway, and in my peripheral vision, the space shuttle and the rings of Saturn would just be popping out at me as I'm walking by. All right. And what I'm going to suggest to you is the Ten Commandments can be looked at in that same way. Looking into the Ten Commandments and seeing a different picture emerge, we're returning to Exodus 20 once again. So follow the order of events, 1, 2, and 3. All right. Number 1, there shall not exist to you Allahayam, Akarayam, secondary Allahayam to my face. Number 2, you shall not fashion, working by labor, to yourself a graven image. Number 3, do not bow yourself down to them, and do not serve them, for I, Anukaya Yahuwah, your Allahaya, am a jealous God. Yahuwah Allahayam could have stated, you shall not fashion an image, but he didn't. The very fact that graven is placed in front of it just goes to show that the Torah of heaven separates images into 2 categories, graven and non-graven images. Therefore, a graven image cannot possibly mean any image. Just as importantly, Yahuwah Allahayam isn't strictly talking about images or graven images. Cherubim already attest to this fact. He's first and foremost talking about secondary Allahayam, secondary gods, lesser gods. Yahuwah is a jealous Allahayam. Contrarily, The cherubim at his side are servants and messengers of God, not gods themselves. The order of events goes from lesser gods to graven images, and to the of those said gods to bowing down to the said gods. Making graven images of other deities so as to bow down to them is what is strictly forbidden here, not making images. So he appears to be fine with images or icons which direct the worshiper to his holiness. And again, if you don't believe me, just look back at the cherubim. The cherubim were there to direct the worshiper to the holiness of God. You would pray before those cherubim, and your prayers would go to God. You were not worshiping the cherubim themselves. Iconoclast versus the bronze serpent. Has it been stated already that I grew up Baptist? I'm just making sure that you haven't forgotten, though you probably haven't. But really, it could have been any number of iconoclast churches. If the denomination happens to claim that icons are idols and everyone who prays in front of them are going to hell, then that's the denomination that I derive from, which made the incident in Numbers 21, 6-9 a real head scratcher. Just skipping down to verse 9 here of chapter 21 in Numbers. And Moses fashioned a nakash of copper, and he placed it upon a standard. And he existed conditionally if those bitten by ha-nakash, a man, when he beheld the nakash of copper, he lived. Denominations have the bad habit of creating unanswered theological questions, and the copper serpent on the pole tops that list. By the way, I've already devoted an entire paper to the serpent-seraphim connection in Wastelands of the Seraphim. Also noting the basilisk serpent as well as the seraphim and basilisk symbiotic relationship with the dragon and serpent seed. I know that's a lot there. So don't expect a repeat of that Sunday school lesson again. For those of you, writing comments, you didn't address this. So that's not the point of this paper. It was my earliest Millennial Kingdom investigative paper, and certainly a foundational one at that. Cherubim may be images in the tabernacle and temple, but the copper serpent is undoubtedly elevated to icon status. Israel turned to the icon and was saved, which is why the incident makes zero sense to everybody at the Bible study, because the Lord chose a means of salvation which completely contradicts Protestantism's every repeat reading of Exodus 20. But now that you have revisited it with fresh eyes and an expanded perception, we know better. I remember sitting down as a teenager having Bible study in my church, and this would come up. What about the serpent on the pole? And people would be like, I don't know. That doesn't make any sense in our worldview. It must have been a hiccup, a glitch in the Bible. And then, of course, we'll get to the part with Hezekiah destroys it. If Yahweh was against fashioning an image, and he was against bowing down to an icon, then his commanding of Moses brought a great sin upon Israel, even though it was employed for salvation purposes. Obviously, Moses wrote the Torah in such a way that we can use the Torah to define the Torah. For example, we can know what Ham's sin was because Moses defined uncovering his father's nakedness a little later on in Leviticus 18:7. The same applies here. According to Numbers 21, 6-9, we can know what a graven image isn't. Top of the hour news flash, it happens to mirror what Orthodoxy has been stating all along. Here's a passage from the Gospel of John in the Paleo Hebrew Scriptures, which we haven't put out yet. We're working on it, but here's an early preview of it. And just as Messiah did elevate the serpent in the wilderness, in like manner, by necessity, the son of the Adam will be lifted up, for the purpose that all those faithful in him should not perish, but conditionally he should inherit life unto time, age, enduring. For in this manner, Ha Elohim did love the world such that he gave his son, his one and only unique one, for the purpose that those faithful in him should not perish, but conditionally he should inherit life for a time, age, enduring. But Ha Elohim did not send forth his son toward the world to condemn the world, but that conditionally, for the purpose and intent that he should save the world through him. That's Bashara Ya'u Kanun, or the Gospel of John 3:14 through 21 from the Paleo-Hebrew Scriptures. Correct me if I'm wrong, Protestant theologians, but if I understand your side of the argument, the copper serpent was intended to foreshadow and in fact direct the person being saved to Jesus, which just so happens to replicate the Orthodox argument. The defining difference being that the Orthodox aren't claiming the serpent icon was an exemption to the rule. The truth doesn't work that way. Something that is true one moment doesn't become untrue the next. If Yahshua wanted an incident in his story to foreshadow his salvation, his Yeshua, then using a graven image to accomplish that task seems a bit of a stretch. Unless that is, Exodus 20 was completely fine with it. Well, the iconoclast doesn't see it that way, which is why they will take my Numbers 21 and up the stakes with 2 Kings 18. I'm game. So this is Hezekiah right here. And we read that in verse 4 of chapter 18, he removed the high places, smashed the standing stones, cut down the Asherah, and broke in pieces the bronze serpent that Moshe had made. Because in those days, the people of Israel were making offerings to it, calling it Nakushtan. This Sunday school story is rather tragic, if you ask me. King Hezekiah decided to become an iconoclast and smash the bronze serpent, the very one that Moses made, and he smashed it into pieces. And to think that Titus might have had one more relic to add to his victory arch in Rome. If you keep reading, it's because a bunch of retards confused the image with a real living entity. They offered it food from the local pet store and gave it a gay name like Snakey. You can't fix stupid. And apparently Hezekiah knew it. Rather than expelling them from his court and ordering them back to the local synagogue where they might meet a nice Jewish girl, he decided that correcting theology would be too hard. So he destroyed it. Either Yahweh had caused Moses and Israel to sin, or he didn't. Transgressions of the Torah don't change. Either the bronze serpent was intended for salvation purposes, or it wasn't. I'm not doubting Hezekiah's righteousness. Orthodoxy doesn't print him a baseball card complete with a halo for nothing. You certainly can't accuse the guy of not being jealous or zealous. I'm sorry, excuse me. The guy, you can't accuse him of not being zealous. He was a very zealous guy. I'm simply questioning his batting average. Hezekiah didn't like the abuse, so he canceled out its proper use. Changing theology, what do you make of that? Some people worship money. It is only a little convenient that he didn't end the monetary system as well. All right, moving on. Iconography in the Christian catacombs. Now, earlier on in this paper, I said there was no iconography before Constantine, and actually that's not true. Forgive me, I'm sometimes slow at these things. Before starting up the assembly line on this one, I literally just got done updating a couple of other research papers, Leviathan and the Resurrection of Rome. If you haven't seen my presentation I gave about 2 weeks ago on the Resurrection of Rome, go check it out. I thought it was a pretty good one. And in there, I noted my visit to the Christian catacombs in Rome and also to the Vatican Museum, where the most excellent Christian sarcophagus collection was put on display. The purpose of both was ultimately to show that early Christians used pictures and carved images depicting scenes from the Bible, both Old Testament and New, which demonstrates their hope of the resurrection to come, and actually their salvation at the beginning of the 1,000 years. I simply didn't put the two together. Depicting Jesus Christos was apparently not a theological problem, as he makes frequent appearances in the catacombs and sarcophaguses. Post-apostolic saints do as well. The catacombs are of the utmost importance because they reveal precisely how Christians viewed images in pre-Nicene centuries, positively. Suffice to say, Nazarene images like the menorah are also represented down there. Any other questions? And by the way, these menorah images would be placed right next to Jesus and the other saints. If you need this spelled out for you, the catacombs are so illustriously colored in parts that it appears as though Christians chose to be buried in an underground art museum. So now jumping over to Judaism, iconography versus Roman Judaism. Modern Judaism has attempted to remove themselves from the images game, convincing us that they were never a part of it to begin with. Well, they can run, but they can't hide. In 1932, or was it 1933, the internet can't seem to make up their mind, the discovery of a 3rd century synagogue at Dura Europos in Syria shocked the world. I too have seen the pictures and am shocked. Shocked, I tell you. Up until then, the scholars had simply taken the Jews' word for it and assumed they would never create such an elaborately painted structure for worship. That was their first mistake. I have seen wall frescoes, but the little synagogue in Dura Europos takes the icing on the cake. You could see the pictures of it right here. If you need to look at it really quickly, take a screenshot or something like that. And then we go to another synagogue. This is in Galilee. These are the floors that they dug up right here. And I guess you'd call this the Hukok Synagogue. It's in Galilee, like I said. It disappeared from his story long ago. Did it survive the advent of the Millennial Kingdom? Not really sure. When it was finally excavated in 2011, mosaic floors testified to Judaism's sinister past. They too were into images. Dun, dun, dun. So scandalous. Initially, archaeologists believed that this synagogue to be 2nd or 3rd century, though the scholars are now thinking it was erected soon after Constantine in the 4th or possibly even the 5th century. Isn't it amazing how they don't really know? They're just kind of wild guesses. Once again, we have testimony of the Jews creating illustrious images of people from the book. Did you notice here look how huge these grapes are? This is obviously the 2 good spies who came back with the grapes of the giants and said, let's go in and take this land. Those are huge grapes. I've never seen a depiction of Jonah where a fish eating a fish is eating him, but let's not get distracted. Oh yeah, right here. If you can see that, that's Jonah's legs coming out. He's being swallowed by a fish, being swallowed by another fish, being swallowed by another bigger fish. That's pretty crazy. The synagogue sits empty of religious artifacts, but what are you to expect after 1,500 years in ruins? So given this, Dura Europos and the temple complex of Solomon, I am finding it harder to believe that the Jews were against the idea of images. If anything, the Jews becoming anti-image may have been to spite the image people so freely enjoying their images in Christ, because the one side was favored by the world to come and the other wasn't, if you get my drift. So let's talk now. Let's get into the meat of it. That was all set up, all right? Let's get into the meat of it right now. We're going to get into the theology of iconography. And, here we'll be talking about iconoclast versus the adoration of icons. Although we have revisited Exodus 20, and I have shown you the order of events as well as the intended context, I'm wondering if I shall have to do it again. It's not a problem. Unlearning what we have learned often takes rigid repetition, because somebody's prepared to tell me icons are okay so long as we don't bow down to them. Bowing down is the idolatrous part, apparently. And haven't you heard, orthodoxy makes a bad habit of it. Bowing to them, that is. Yeah, well, the fact that Exodus 20 commands Israel not to bow down to graven images just goes to show that the possibility might arise wherein someone might bow down to a non-graven image. Read it again. There is no command against it. This is what we read in Genesis 1:27 from the Greek LXX, the Septuagint. And God said, let us make man according to our image, and likeness. There is that word again, icon. It is a Greek word for image or icon, and the Septuagint places it in the very first chapter of the Bible. We have already been made aware that Jesus Christos is the icon of the invisible God in Colossians 1:15. But now we too are icons of the same invisible God. Incredible. Yahshua Messiah is an icon like us. So now we are running into problems when we encounter icons of the invisible God bowing down to other icons of the invisible God in the Bible. Only if the act of bowing down is idolatry, that is. So to complicate matters, they are doing so in reverence or worship. So we see that Abraham doing this in Genesis 23:7. It says, then Abraham rose and bowed down, prokino is the Greek word, before the people of the land, the Hittites. Now, the reason I'm going through the Greek LXX is because this is what Orthodoxy during the Millennial Kingdom or the Middle Ages, they were going off of, right? They're not going off of the Hebrew. Now it is time to drop a new word into the investigation. Prokino can be found all throughout the Greek LXX. English Bibles like to translate it to mean worship or bow down. Same word, different translations, depending, of course, upon the context. And what do we see Abraham doing? He is showing honor and respect to the Hittites by committing the deed of prokino. Abraham is bowing down in a worshipful manner. Then we see Jacob doing this in Genesis 33:3. And Jacob himself went on ahead and bowed prokino to the ground 7 times as he approached his brother Esau. 7. That's the number of times Jacob violated the sin of prokino, which is a made-up sin, you know. I'm simply trying to think like an iconoclast, though it is getting harder to do. Regardless, this is getting out of hand. See, kids, this is why you don't wrestle with God. Jacob's hip must have been out of whack. Okay, so moving on to Joshua chapter 5, verses 13 through 14, it says, neither, he replied, I have now come as a commander of the Lord's army. Then Joshua bowed with his face to the ground in worship and asked him, what does my Lord want to say to his servant? If you thought Jacob's bad hip was bad, then Joshua is off the charts. Some of you were even getting ready to argue that bowing down 7 times wasn't an act of worship. The illusion is broken. Joshua's prokino was nothing short of worship. It says so right there. And to an angel of all people. Not that Joshua is declaring the angels to be God, mind you. No, Joshua is showing reverence for a messenger of God, and he is worshiping. I'll tell you, the Bible is a controversial book capable of sending millions of souls into a hissy fit. I happen to like it that way. The prokino sin is just something which we have made up in the West. All right, let's talk about iconography, windows to heaven. This is where I actually, now that I've gone through all that laborious stuff, this is where I really start getting excited thinking about the theology of iconography. Icons are theology in color. I keep hearing about all the illiterate people in the Middle Ages as if there isn't an artwork illiteracy problem today. Bad theology as well. I keep hearing about that one and couldn't happen to disagree more. Ever since the serpent asked Eve, did God really say? There has always been bad theology. So this goes back to Genesis 3. Plenty of retardation to go around. But why throw the baby out with the bathwater? All indications point to a spiritual comprehension far beyond our own. And I'm talking about the Middle Ages here. The chapter and verse only crowd may not be too pleased to hear that icons are ultimately intended to serve the same purpose as words. If properly utilized, see, this is one of the things where we made so much into words on a page. And, forbidden any theology coming out of paint itself, rather than ink. If properly utilized, language and art can form a visual confession carrying us beyond the words and the paint itself. So we are not merely dealing with religious artwork. Icons are instruments through which the mysteries of God, or the mysteries of heaven, can likewise become accessible to his creation. They are quite literally referred to windows to heaven. When I saw that the first time, I got really excited. This idea of windows to heaven. Spiritual gateways that connect the believer on earth with the saints and the angels in the divine realm, inviting us all to partake in and tether the kingdom within. Kissing. The Orthodox have a habit of kissing icons, particularly the women. But are they being kissed in return? Step up your game, men. I am told by the Orthodox that you don't have to kiss an icon if you feel weird about it. The priest may be carrying, he may be packing heat, but he isn't holding a gun to your head. Nobody's going to chase you down. You can kiss them when you're good and ready, or so I'm told. Meanwhile, I have tried searching out the origins of this curious practice of kissing and have no definitive answer to give. Oral tradition claims St. Luke was the first iconophile and quite the kisser. You see what I did there? I have been throughout the Middle East, sections of the Mediterranean and Latin countries, and can tell you that greeting with a kiss is a thing to this very day. Just ask any Allied soldier taking his marching orders through the liberation of Paris, and they'll have stories to tell. And anyways, we have the following Bible memory verse at our disposal. Verses, I should say, at our disposal. First one is Romans 16:16. Greet one another with a holy kiss. All the churches of Christ greet you. 1 Corinthians 16:20. All the brothers send you greetings. Greet one another with a holy kiss. 2 Corinthians 13:12. Greet one another with a holy kiss. 1 Thessalonians 5:26. Greet all the brothers with a holy kiss. Pucker up, I guess, in the most holy manner possible, of course. I mean, I knew the circumcised were sitting next to the uncircumcised on these Sabbath shindigs, and that it was a trending topic of the first century, but this is getting pretty intimate. Who knew church could be so fun? Because clearly I joined the wrong denomination, and that is very true. Basic etiquette for men. If you're going to greet another man's wife with a kiss, albeit a holy kiss, be sure to keep it light and on the cheek, and don't even think about it unless you have first offered it to her husband. Same exact kiss on the same facial region. Better yet, practice it on her husband first. Why kiss an icon, though? Because Paul said to, duh. All the churches were doing it. The Romans, the Corinthians, and the Thessalonians, for starters. But then Paul tells the Romans that every church of Christ sent their love via kiss. Could it be every church outside of the three space dimensions in time? Or are we keeping this investigation purely pragmatic? You tell me. I can take this into the furthest outer reaches if you'd like me to. The saints are alive and resurrected in heaven. St. Basil the Great says this: the honor shown to the image passes to the prototype. There, does that answer your question? I never said you had to like it. Basil the Great lived between 330 and 379, and that's his answer. Since we can't very well grab a ladder and climb to heaven, at least not in the literal sense, though metaphorically or spiritually we can, kissing a window into heaven is how many do it. I bet you they're going around kissing each other all the time in heaven. Up there, it's a regularly greet with a holy kiss fest. Get used to it. A raise of hands. I am only asking my Protestant friends, specifically those of you who do not own a Book of Common Prayer on the shelf. The rest of you need to keep quiet. How many of you can name the following three saints? Right here. Just look at them real quick. Give it a looky-loo. And you tell me, name these three saints right now. Hurry up. I don't have long. I'll give you three hints. That's not John the Baptist, Mary Magdalene, or Bartholomew. I know that's what some of you were thinking. Give up already? I can't blame you. The answer I was looking for is Saints Alexis, Marina, and a name I can't even pronounce, Euphrosynos, each holding their respective MacGuffins. These are some faces that I think could use a holy kiss, don't you think? I went out of my way finding obscure saints so that we can focus upon the commonalities. Their large eyes inform us that they are in the know. There are spiritual truths to be discovered, in which their MacGuffins are capable of teaching us. Contrasting that are their small mouths, in which they have become masters of silence during the stillness of prayer, not stillness of power, stillness of prayer. So you can see this with all icons, all right? Small mouths, big eyes, and of course they often hold their MacGuffins. And you'll see the same, MacGuffins being held in Catholic icons as well. Icons use a technique where highlights are painted lighter than the base colors. Though it is true that we've moved on from 3 obscure saints to a familiar scene from the Bible, the applications still apply. Gold backgrounds fill every frame, representing the uncreated light of heaven and the divine glory of God. What is this so-called uncreated light? This is an open forum. I asked the same question when first stumbling upon it. So inquiries are welcome. St. Gregory Palamas is the man in the icon over here on the right. As the Archbishop of Thessalonica, Gregory became a cornerstone defender of the uncreated light of the Transfiguration, as well as the distinction between God's essence and energies. And I actually got really excited when learning about these medieval ideas of essence and energies. So this is what he says right here. This light was the light of the divine nature, and as such, it was uncreated and divine. So also in the teachings of the fathers, Jesus Christus was transfigured not by taking on something he did not have, or by being changed into something new, but by manifesting his disciples' ability to see what was always there to begin with. The light which Gregory is speaking of is not created, and therefore not to be confused with a created object like the sun or sunlight. It's all around us, but we cannot see it. Jesus Christos always had this light. And in my next paper I'm developing now, even you'll see that even they show an artwork that began when he was a baby. And the Catholics do as well. He did not put it on or take it off like a cloak. He simply manifested his disciples' ability to see what was always there to begin with. So if you've ever observed a higher concentration of transfiguration on Mount Tabor icons within the halls of Orthodox artwork, now you know, and knowing is half the battle. They put a huge emphasis on this right here, because they're showing you what, all of these icons are intended to show you the same thing, the transfiguration. Do you see what's happening here? I'm pretty excited by the thought of that. All the saints. Getting back to Saints Alexis, Marina, and the guy I can't pronounce, though there are probably hundreds, if not thousands, of other examples. Simple deductive reasoning would suggest that all 3 are transfigured. Try finding a natural shadow on these people. You can't do it. Do you know what this means? We are staring into the face of a resurrected saint and reaching up to them through a window to heaven. This time I will not leave you guessing. We have right before us Saints Nikita and Marina. They were both demon slayers. Marina must have taken a page from Jael's tent peg to the head in Judges 4. Whoever said being in the uncreated light canceled out being a girl boss didn't have the faintest clue what they were talking about. Skills like that will drive up the cost of a dowry in a hurry. And of course, Jesus Christos sending Satan away should immediately be recognized by every denomination. What do all of these icons have in common? We see large eyes of inner gnosis, small meditative mouths. We see uncreated light, absent shadows, and an unprecedented authority over Satan. He's black, whereas the others are not. Must be a checkerboard or duality thing. This is what St. Gregory Palamas says. For wickedness is nothing else than the withdrawal of goodness, just as darkness is nothing else than the withdrawal of light. It's funny. I got this like Southern slang now. I can't even say that word right. Uncreated light surrounds us, though most will choose not to see it. If anything, they are repulsed by it. Light and darkness is nothing more than a state of mind. Either we choose to fill it with uncreated light, or we grow comfortable or complacent with the darkness that lacks it. I'm guessing Gregory is pulling his theology from John chapter 1. Should I quote from it? Do you dare me to? Don't tempt. I just might do it. And here's what it says from the Gospel of John, the Paleo-Hebrew Scriptures, chapter 1, verse 4 through 5. In him existed the living ones, and the living ones existed as light to the sons of Adam. And the light shone into Cheshach, and the Cheshach could not comprehend him. So Cheshach isn't simply a Hebrew word for darkness. It has additional connotations in that Cheshach is a living entity. So there is further evidence that we all live on a checkerboard rather than a yellow submarine. Either we recognize the Creator when we see him or we don't. Satan sure didn't, but that is neither here nor there at the moment. Candles are lit before icons more often than not. And you know that's suspect. Must be idols. Or maybe, yes, just maybe, hear me out on this, fire is a tool intended to illuminate the room around us, as well as the uncreated light in our mind. Could it be? Well, here's another passage from the good book which will help illuminate this investigation. This comes from 1 John 1, 5 through 7. And this is the message which we have heard from him and proclaimed to you. God is light, and there is no darkness in him, none. If we claim to have fellowship with him while we are walking in the darkness, we are lying and not living out the truth. But if we are walking in the light, as he is in the light, then we have fellowship with each other, and the blood of his son, Yeshua, purifies us from all sin. If we claim not to have sin, we are deceiving ourselves, and the truth is not in us. If we acknowledge our sins, then since he is trustworthy and just, he will forgive them and purify us from all wrongdoing. If we claim we have not been sinning, we are making him out to be a liar, and his word is not in us. 1 John 1, 5 through 7. Iconography places an emphasis on having communion with the church within time and an equally heavy one outside and beyond time. Call me crazy. No, seriously, please do. But I like where this is going. 1 John 1:7 in particular reads like a crash course to orthodoxy. The only way to have fellowship with the only way to have fellowship with other light bearers is to walk in the light as Christ is in the light. And before the darkness of self-righteousness takes over, it is best to hack away at the ego by recognizing our sin. Check yourself before you wreck yourself. Well, a bunch of people didn't like candles, apparently, especially when iconoclasts saw iconophiles praying with candles in churches. They wanted to snuff them out so that nobody could see the icons anymore, which is why Saint Nicodemus of the Holy Mountain came to their defense. In order to help illustrate his point, which I am about to give, I managed to find an actual picture of candles being lit before an icon of Nicodemus of the Holy Mountain. That's him right there on the right, I think. I'm not exactly sure, but it's kind of ironic, right? I found an actual icon of Nicodemus being lit with candles. Did you notice that's him? At least I think that is Nicodemus of the Holy Mountain. I could be wrong. These bearded fathers all look the same. Anyways, this is a quote that he gave. He said, "The grace of the Holy Spirit is hidden in the heart and covered up by the passions and sins. And the more a man acts in accordance with the commandments of Christ, the more he is cleansed, and the more the fire of divine grace lights in his hearts." Nicodemus of the Holy Mountain. So lighting candles serves many purposes, and Nicodemus gives a few. I'm guessing he is pulling his reason straight out of 1 John 1. Jesus Christos is the word, he is the Torah, and his commandments will never change. Therefore, light incites the iconophile to live according to what Christ has taught, to walk as he has walked, to be in the light and shine in a dark world, continually purifying themselves. The flame symbolizes their burning love for God. The saint in the icon likewise shines as a flame in eternity and a burning example. Christ arrived to teach us theosis, and they have achieved it. The lighted candle is a way for the iconophile to ask for their intercession. So, surprisingly, I didn't talk a lot in here about the intercession of the saints, which I should have. Now in hindsight, I'm like, man, I left out that whole section. But, well, I'll be talking about theosis a little bit up here. But one of the quick ways to explain the intercession of the saints, all right? So has anybody here been, I don't know, sick before? Maybe there was a job you wanted. Maybe there was something, and you're like, I need prayer for this. My dog is sick. Can somebody pray for my dog? And what do? You go to other believers. You go to the saints, and you ask for the intercession of their prayers. Why? Why pray? Ask for their intercession of their prayers. Why not just you pray yourself? Why do you need them to do it? Well, because where 2 or 3 are gathered in his name, and we want other people to take our cause before the Father. So because the Millennial Kingdom saints believed that the resurrection had already happened. We could see this, of course, in the Gospel of Nicodemus. I could build a whole case on this. They believe that they are no longer in Sheol, that they are living, they are no longer dead, they are resurrected, they are in heaven. And the intercession of the saints is not praying or worshiping other people as gods. They are asking them as living beings to intercede on their behalf and pray for them. That is what they're asking for. So that's a scary thing for Protestants, but understanding that the same thing you do to the person down the street and asking to pray for you, that's what you're asking to do with the icons. So iconography, experiencing God's energies. Grace was the breaking point. I'll speak for myself. I was sick of the abuse, an entire lifetime of it. No, that's not quite right either. Protestants will freely admit that there are grace abusers in their ranks, just as assuredly as the Orthodox and Catholics will admit to idolatrous iconophiles. And truth be told, I was tired of the very definition of grace as given by the Western pulpits. The Protestant view has grace imputed or credited to a believer like some sort of a legal pardon. And there is a legal pardon element to it. Don't get me wrong. But nobody can hope to be righteous apart from righteousness of Christ, according to the Protestant idea of imputed grace. And I don't agree with that. Don't mind me. You are free to continue that route. But after 5 failed centuries of the 5 solas experiment, there has to be something better offered out there. There has to be. As I've already explained, an icon is a window to heaven containing the uncreated light, by which the iconophile can experience God's energies. So now we have another element of iconography to unpack. The energies of God is none other than grace, according to the said church. I intend to expound upon that, but first, here's another fancy theological word for you. Theosis means deification, becoming divine. Is this a New Age thing or something? While you figure that out, theosis describes a transformative process of becoming holy, essentially conforming to the very character of God. You hear me say this all the time, thereby uniting with God's uncreated light through his energies. That would be through his grace, all of which amounts to the purpose of life. Ephesians 3:2-8 says this: I assume that you have heard of the work God in his grace has given me to do for your benefit. Skipping down to verse 7. I became a servant of this good news by God's gracious gift, which he gave me through the operation of his power. To me, the least important of all God's holy people, was given this privilege of announcing to the Gentiles the good news of the Messiah's unfathomable riches. Now, asking the Orthodox, Paul lays out the case for their grace theology in Ephesians 3. There are probably other passages, but this is the big one, I am told. We should take a closer look at it and try our best to understand their position rather than going nuh-uh and condemning it. And I hope you understand that's what I'm doing to this whole thing. I think my regular viewers understand this. I'm trying to understand their position, right? I'm sick and tired of being one of those nuh-uh people. I just want to hear from them and try to present it, this tradition that has gone on for 2,000 years now, really. We first read that Paul has received an assignment from God in his grace, a work which has been given for the church's benefit. He then likens himself to a servant in verse 7, at least in this translation, though the servant mentioned here describes more of a stewardship. which would be highly metaphorical if his imparting grace were solely executed in the Protestant preaching role. Is that how we impart grace, through sermons? And is he imparting the other four solas in his announcements as well? Perhaps there's something more going on. And there is, because Paul tells us what grace is. He says, the grace of God was gifted to Paul by the working of God's power. The word power in the Greek is precisely where orthodoxy finds the word energy. This is what St. Gregory Palamas says. Like the sun, we can experience God in his energies, while his divine essence remains unknowable and unreachable. God's grace is not a participation in the transcendent and unknowable essence of God. However, it is a real experience of God through his divine energy. So we'll be talking here about the difference between energies and essence, if that was confusing to you. And as I say here, so now would be a good time to go over the distinction between energies and essence, as already explained to us by Gregory. Essence describes what God is in himself. It is transcendent, wholly unknowable. We cannot know his essence. It's beyond human comprehension. No mortal has experienced his essence ever. Energies conjures up the energies, however, unlike essence, conjures up the uncreated light in iconography and describes how God acts and reveals himself in the world. Think back to Mount Tabor. Grace, aka energies, empowers human transformation in theosis, deification. Icons pave the way, and the saints in the icons teach us. So take a moment to look at this here while I take a drink coffee. This is one of my favorite medieval depictions ever. And this depiction right here, this icon, I think explains, if you were to explain all of medieval spirituality in one icon, it would be this one. If you were to explain it in two icons, it's going to be one I'm going to be showing after this. I mean, this right here should be a book cover. There is hardly a better icon to describe theosis, and in fact, the entire medieval worldview. I would say even within Catholicism, all right, than with the ladder of divine ascent, a late 12th century icon located at the foot of Mount Sinai in the monastery of St. Catherine in Egypt. This would also be the opportune moment to bring up another important theological puzzle piece, synergy. I hope you're not too confused by all this theology I'm throwing at these terms I'm throwing at you. The icon depicts monks ascending the ladder towards Jesus Christos. So you can see right here. So here is Jesus Christos up in the window in heaven. He's reaching out. He's grabbing hold of this one monk who has made it to the top. A lot of them, they're not going to make it. And notice again, remember that the demons are purely black, right? They're the absence of uncreated light, the complete absence. They're in it. It's all around them. They can't help it. They don't see it. They choose not to live it. So the ladder itself acts as a spine connecting the subconscious in the lower realm with the higher self. And it doubles as an axis mundi, the inner temple in New Jerusalem, which can only be found by the penitent man who navigates the labyrinth within. I just threw a lot of my research papers at you right there. I should have thrown in the maypole too. We know they are mortals and that their theosis is not yet certified because nobody has received a halo. So that's always something you could, of course, tell with these. So nobody here has a halo. You can see up in heaven, they have halos. Though Christ is extending his hand to welcome in the monk identified for us, it's in writing there a John Climacus. Having completed his life in the earth, everyone else is still in grave peril. Demons do everything in their power to pull them off the ladder and hurl them into destruction. One monk can even be seen getting devoured by Hellmouth. If you look right here at the bottom, he's going in headfirst right into Hellmouth, which has already been emptied out of the saints. The ascent is certainly hazardous, though the pilgrims are not alone. So look to the upper and lower corners of the icon. I'll scan up there in a second. They are being assisted by the prayers of the saints and the angels. And so we know these are the saints. We see the Holy Spirit fire here of Pentecost. So it seems like it's pointing to the 12 apostles of Christ. And then, of course, we see the angels up here in heaven. So above and below, they're all praying the intercession of the saints. The saints in heaven are praying for us in the same way. And for those of you who are against this idea, I mean, I had to think about this long and hard. I'm like, wait a second. Yahshua prays for us, our Messiah. That is such a beautiful thought. Our Messiah prays for us. On his last night when he was betrayed, he was in the garden. He prayed for all of us in history that we would be united in echad with his Father, just as he is united in echad with the Father. What a beautiful prayer for all of us. And I find it very difficult to believe that the other saints who are in a priestly ministry are not praying for us as well. Just as all you mommies and daddies out there who pray for your children or grandchildren or whatever, the same thing. I think our ancestors, the people who made it up there, they're looking down and they're praying for us that we would make the right decisions and walk on the right path. So Protestantism primarily defines grace as God's unmerited favor, a forensic gift of justification that declares a sinner righteous on the spot. And again, this is where I just part ways with this thinking. I used to be this. I don't anymore. It just gives people a license to sin, and it's a failed experiment. They go solidified or bust, but the medievalists had a different story to tell. Again, so it really got to me when I did my King Henry VIII research, and I'm reading all these quotes by these Protestants in the 1500s, and they're like, this is a new religion. This is new. This is unlike anything for the last 1500 years. I'm like, wait a second, there's something wrong with that. Because Christianity for the 1500 years before you are disagreeing with your theological position, that you're creating this new theology to break away from, the church of the past. The iconophile focuses upon synergy, which is an active participation with God's energies. So grace cannot simply be relegated to a legal courtroom pardon. Though, again, there is that element to it. However, it is active and relational. Like the medievalist ascent up the ladder. When the gnosis of uncreated light fills an iconophile who is actively repenting of his sins and walking out the commands of Christ, they are experiencing the actual energy of God, and that is synergy. The two men in the icons before us are identified as Saint Seraphim of Sarov and Saint Mark the Ascetic. Seraphim, that's the guy on the left. That's quite a name. What's in a name exactly? See, these are the sort of things that keep me up at night. If you don't get it, then don't worry your pretty little self and get your beauty rest and let's just move on. Speaking of sleep, here's another barricade. Is Mark the Ascetic a woodwose or isn't he? I mean, he looks like a Sasquatch. He looks like a wild man of the woods, and he's a Saint Mark the Ascetic. I want to know these things. Saint Seraphim taught that the entire purpose of the Christian life is the acquisition of God's energies through good deeds done for Christ. I can't say I disagree. We should be, using our talents that Christ has given us, Yahshua has given us to expand his kingdom. Complementing Seraphim is St. Mark, the wild man or ascetic or whatever, the Sasquatch. And he taught that the energies of God, aka grace, is mystically planted in the heart at baptism through the Holy Spirit. The problem, of course, is that God's energies are covered by the passions and must be illumined through action. It is only through acting upon Christ's commandments, and I like that, through humility, I like that too, and a profound sorrow for our sins, I also like that the illuminating fire of God's energies can begin to shine. So in order for God's grace to shine in our lives, we have to obey Christ's commandments through humility and profound sorrow for our sins. That sounds like a pretty good reading of the Bible for me. And then God's energies, aka his grace, which is an active power. It is not just a pardon, a courtroom pardon. It begins to shine. We start to lead towards that synergy of achieving theosis. All right. And we're getting close to the end here. Iconography, the inseparable natures of God. So take a look at these real quick. This should be pretty familiar to everybody out there, this illustration. It's probably the most popular painting of Yeshua Messiah or Jesus Christos of all time. Another thing icons offer is a profound theology regarding the sanctification of matter. Not simply in Jesus Christos, but in everybody, particularly those who have achieved theosis. And like my decades-long hang-ups with Exodus 20, I took far too long to sink my teeth into this. Even while commenting upon Christ's Pantocrator in my shrouded Turin paper, and that's Christ's Pantocrator right there. Noting his similarity to the man in the shrouds, if you're confused by that, I show that there are depictions of the man in the shroud that go back hundreds and hundreds of years before the shroud ever officially emerged through the Knights Templar. The inseparable dual natures of God on the canvas or the cloth was slow to register. It's one thing to know and another thing to know, if you get my drift. When you know, you know. Sometimes these things take time to know. How long do you need? Christians have long gazed with fascination into the face of Pantocrator Jesus, not completely understanding what seems off about it, and that is okay. To quote Monet, why is it necessary to understand when it is simply necessary to love? His left side, which will be your right, offers a soft, gentle, and merciful gaze, as though he sympathizes with your struggles. So you look over here, don't look at these on the right of the page. Look at the one on the left. His right side right there is what I'm describing. That's his merciful humanity side. And then the left side looks completely different. And yet the expression on his right or your left pierces into the hidden flaws of the souls with an all-seeing eye, as though the righteous almighty judge of the universe sees your deepest secrets. And that is because Pantocrator Jesus is asymmetrical. So people have done this here where they've replicated both sides, and you could see in one painting that there are two versions of Yahshua here, Jesus Christos. And this is one of the brilliant things about this painting, is what I was saying, that people look at this and they're captivated by it. They don't know why. And it's because there's something something in our subconscious that's working on us. I've said this so many times, all great artwork, even in movies, like the movies that are like really popular within culture, they're usually very esoteric. Even if people don't understand what the esotericism is, it works on them nonetheless. And this painting is incredible. Typically, icon artists depict the subject in the transcended heavenly state, and yet Pantocrator Jesus prefers Messiah on the earth in order to illustrate an important point. He is simultaneously both God and man, two distinct, inseparable natures, divine and human. There just so happens to be a theological term for that, diophysitism. I can't even pronounce it. If you have never heard of it before, then I wouldn't be too concerned. Not even autocorrect recognizes its spelling. I kept trying to spell it wrong. It's saying it's spelled wrong. I kept looking at it, going like, no, that's how it's spelled. So not even autocorrect realized that it was a thing. Incredibly, Yahshua became man in a precise moment in his story, but a far more astonishing fact, and this just blows my mind to think of this, is that he chose to remain man for all eternity. He creates Adam. Adam falls. He says, I will come and save you personally. He becomes a son of Adam, and he stays for all eternity a son of Adam. God. Like, that is an unbelievably amazing story. It is a great wonder that Christ's Pantocrator, the oldest of all known Pantocrator icons in Orthodoxy, survived the two iconoclasms of the said dates. We've already been through those. And I'm guessing its remote location at St. Catherine's Monastery in Egypt probably had something to do with it. Well, thank God for the desert. In 451, the Council of Chalcedon was the fourth major ecumenical council in Christian history. Who knows, it may turn out to be my absolute favorite of all the councils in Christian history. If you need this pointed out to you on a map, I guess Chalcedon, if I'm pronouncing it correctly, was a smidge north of Nicaea and just east of Constantinople. It was almost bordering Constantinople. It was convoked by Emperor Marcian and defined how the divine and human natures of Jesus Christos coexist, resulting in the following creed, which I will read from. We then, following the Holy Fathers, all with one consent, teach men to confess one and the same Son, our Lord Jesus Christos, the same perfect in Godhead and also perfect in manhood, truly God and truly man, of a reasonable soul and body, consubstantial with the Father according to the Godhead, and consubstantial with us according to the manhood. In all things like unto us without sin, begotten before all ages of the Father according to the Godhead, but in these last days, I like how they say the last days, for us and for our salvation, born of the Virgin Mary, the Mother of God, according to the manhood. One and the same Christ, Son, Lord, only begotten, to be acknowledged in two natures, inconfusedly, unchangeably, indivisibly, inseparably, the distinction of natures being by no means taken away by the union, but rather the property of each nature being preserved and concurring in one person and one substance, not parted or divided into two persons, but one and the same Son, and only begotten God, the Word, the Lord, Jesus Christos. And that's their creed. This creed defines Jesus Christos as simultaneously God and man, not in part but in full. And I happen to agree with them. If you guys, take a different view, that's fine. This has been the theology of the church pretty much across the world for all of history. And again, I'm in agreement with them. Jesus Christos did not cease becoming God when becoming man, as assuredly as he did not cease being man when dying and resurrecting as God. Messiah is one distinct person in whom two complete natures, divine and human, coexist forever without division. He came to sanctify matter and then show us the way. So remember now that they're saying that even though what this Christ Pantocrator is showing us is that if you were maybe living with him on the earth, you might see his left side of the face, which would be our right? But it's the left side of the face that might be like, in his coming in 70 AD or whatever, right? As the judge. It's the divine that glowed on the Mount of Transfiguration that was there all the time. It's just that they're seeing the other side there. So I absolutely love this painting. Great stuff. Concluding thoughts, and then we'll end this tonight. The first publication of iconography focused almost exclusively upon Greek Orthodoxy, if you didn't pick up on that at this point. That was perhaps a strange decision, considering that I spent last year investigating the cathedrals and relics of Catholicism in countries like England, France, Belgium, Germany, Austria, Italy, the Vatican, Portugal, and Spain. So clearly I'm not avoiding Catholicism, because if that's what you were thinking, then you are wrong. I simply have a stack of work to attend to, particularly as it pertains to the Millennial Kingdom. Believe it or not, an inquisition into the icons of Catholicism was the original intent. But then something marvelous happened along the way. I discovered the icons of Orthodoxy, and I thirsted for them. How in the world have I managed nearly half a century in this life surrounded by persons who apathetically shrug their shoulders at the thoughts of icons? I think it is high time to meet new people. As a reminder, I am not here to convince anyone to be naughty. I do not advocate a license to sin, nor do the iconophiles. Now, a quick point on this. When I read through the Torah portions every week, and I tell people that when I'm reading from the Torah itself, the actual words, what I'm doing is the long-standing tradition. I'm sitting in the seat of Moses. All right. So whenever I read you the Torah, do what it says. Or if it tells you not to do something, don't do that, right? Anytime I then open my mouth to give commentary on what I think it's saying, now I'm giving you Talmudic or traditions of men. You can't escape the traditions of men. I think I'd probably even talk about that right here. Yeah, let me just finish this here. My intent was to glean from spiritual traditions foreign from my own. Some of you are like, yeah, I knew this my whole life. Well, you know what? I didn't. And I think a lot of you didn't. And then show them to you. If you still believe that Exodus 20 forbids all icons, then you should definitely live by that conviction. All right. I'm not trying to stop anyone. In fact, go all the way. Remove all photographs while you're at it. Don't let me bar you. Thanks for stopping by. Hopefully it was out of curiosity rather than hate reading. There are far too many people who base their morality upon another person's immorality. They fixate on that. Don't let this be you. Look, you are free to mock iconography as the quote-unquote traditions of men. This is what I was about to get to. And come up with your own private interpretation. But in the end, you cannot escape being man nor forging your own tradition and then ironically pushing others to live by it. This is something that I finally picked up on after, again, I'm slow, right? I'm a slow theologian. And I'm like, wait a second, all these people out there going, I don't live by the traditions of men, and you're quoting these councils, that's the traditions of men. And then, they quote the scripture, and then they will begin to tell you what they want you to believe. And it's like, no, you're just pushing the tradition. Like, if you were king of the world, you would just push more traditions of men. You can't escape it, people. You cannot escape it. And then, you see all these people with their own private interpretation and all that kind of stuff. I've seen this happen all too often. Just go to Facebook. You just scroll up and down and people mocking the traditions of men, and they're just giving their own traditions. Oh, to be fallible and having the freedom to acknowledge it. Isn't that wonderful to recognize that, we don't understand everything and we just want to learn. And when we get so concerned about being wrong and we have to wear this mask of how holy and righteous we are, and we want everyone else to see that, you live in this fear of looking into something that you're going to be called a label, a name, a heretic, or whatever, And so, anyways, that begs the question: how do we determine if the theology wing of the Salvation Department is true or not? That's a good question. We will most certainly take missteps along the way, but Yahweh has designed it like that. Let us not be frightened or paralyzed by our own fallibility, since he created us that way. The point of our tenure in the earth is to conform to the image, and in fact, the icon, the very character of our Heavenly Father. So ask yourself, does the theology lead you there? If you prefer a blank wall and a white shirt with maybe a black tie to a painted canvas, then this spiritual avenue is certainly not for you. Speaking for myself, I have made a willful decision to unlearn what I have learned and shed the pounds of indoctrination. The diet began over a decade ago, and this has not been easy for me. My own investigative history testifies to the lags and hangups along the way, as well as my missteps, and I've taken them. Though I like to think there have been far more victories than losses. The paper that you now hold in your hand, or if you're maybe watching this on YouTube, serves as a witness to my own continued spiritual metamorphosis. So here is my conclusion. Iconography is not a recent invention. It was not planted into churches, and it cannot be avoided. If icons are forbidden and the intercession of the saints as sin, then the millennial kingdom did not materialize due to the most idolatrous time in Christian history. Or maybe, just maybe, the 1,000 years happened after all, as many of us suspect, and it is the iconoclast who are trying to throw us off its scent. The mysteries of the millennial reign invite us to discover the kingdom within. All right, well, I hope you guys enjoyed that. And I'm going to end it there tonight. Next week, we're going to pick back up with the Torah portions. And of course, we'll be talking about that bronze serpent or copper serpent that was put up on the pole in the wilderness. Love you guys. Let's do this again. Like this video if you haven't already. Be sure to write a comment. Subscribe if you haven't. And I will see you guys around. Have a wonderful Shabbat. Shalom, shalom.